39.
Number 1.
39.
1.
38.
37.
36.
35.
34.
33.
32.
31.
30.
29.
28.
27.
26.
25.
24.
23.
22.
21.
20.
19.
18.
17. 16.
15.
14.
13.
12.
11.
10.
9. 8.
7. 6. 5.
4.
3.
2.
1.
It's time for mouthwash. Giddy up. Hi, and welcome to the Mouthwash Talk Show, a minty fresh take on politics. And it's been a struggle here at the Chateau de Mars Hill studio tonight because I have my first in-studio guest, and we had some trouble with echoes and different things, and we just barely got it going tonight. But, this is our guest is in the next room, and he's on a separate computer, and this is going to be fun. But we do have the whole panel here. They're all here tonight. And we're running just a little bit late. Apologize for that. I know that you are just anxious to get to this show. So we're going to get to it. Let's see. Oh, our topic tonight is media madness, or whatever the thing said on there. And I forgot to put Mark's ball on the thing. I'm going to have to ask for your forgiveness because I've been fishing with my kids for the last 5 days. We got back last night, and I've been scrambling to get back to my job and everything and get this show going just so you can enjoy it tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and play a little commercial here. This is a commercial for our WHMB Channel 40 show because this one goes, recorded version of this show goes on next Monday at 11 p.m. Now we've switched our times. So I'm going to go ahead and play that part. And then we're going to bring the guest on. And we're going to get to it. So, it's only an hour show. Don't want to burn it all up, me talking in front of it. So here, let's listen to this promo for the WHMB audience. And then we'll have our guest, Stephen Crane, on the other side. Have you heard the news about the Mouthwash Talk Show? You mean the Mouthwash Talk Show, a minty fresh take on politics? Yeah, it's moving from the 9:30 slot. It'll be the same great show, just at 11 p.m. Wow, that's a great show. I think a lot of folks will tune in at 11 p.m. So make sure you catch the Mouthwash Talk Show at 11 p.m. Mondays right here on WHMB Channel 40. All right. Stephen Crane, all the way up from Martinsville. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, John.
Okay. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. And then I'm going to ask you what the heck you're doing on the Mouthwash show.
Absolutely. I've already been asking myself that since the evening began, but that's all right. Here we go. No, originally born and raised in Morgan County. I am the youngest of 4 boys, and spent the last 20 years everywhere but Morgan County. Somewhere in there, I got a master's in journalism down at Indiana University and found myself working for newspapers from California to Wyoming and now back here in Indiana. So I discovered a love certainly for journalism in general, and newspapers in particular, particularly community newspapers. And so it was a bit surreal coming back to Indiana and ultimately finding myself not just working for a community newspaper, but my hometown community.
Well, that sounds cool. So, we were talking earlier, and you were, wanting to tell some of the dirty little secrets of the mainstream media, and your mission is out to change that. In what ways do you see it having a problem? In what ways do you want to change it?
Absolutely. And so when I was initially hired to work at there are 2 newspapers down in Morgan County, one being a 6-day a week and one being a twice a week when I was initially hired. At that time, it was owned by a family, the Schurz family, based up in northern Indiana. The South Bend Tribune was their flagship newspaper. They also owned a couple dozen in a few different states, including down here in southern Indiana. There was a group of about 5, including Bedford, Bloomington, 2 in Morgan County. They also acquired 1 in Spencer and Owen County. And that made up the Hoosier Times group. So at that time, again, family owned. And then in 2019, all of that came to a screeching halt as they sold us to corporate interests who are also, of course, publicly traded on the stock exchange. Later that year, ultimately, that same company, Gatehouse Media, bought out Gannett. And then, of course, given the brand, they adopted that name. And yeah, the reality of corporate ownership at the local level when it comes to local community newspapers was evident, and none of it was good. And so we were looking to actually acquire those newspapers and see if we could get them back into local ownership. And we were unsuccessful in that endeavor. And so we are now starting our own newspaper down in Morgan County.
Well, that's sort of how the Mouthwash show got started. When I ran for public office, I was not really covered by the media. I said, you know what, this isn't, they said, well, if you sue somebody, you'll get coverage. And we still didn't get very much coverage. So it was always if. So we started our own. I started actually Your Voice, Your Call, handed that off to Chris Moore. And then I had Do Something Indie for a while. And then that was more of a positive thing in Central Indiana, which my wife sort of runs that show when she gets to it. But I want to do politics. So I just made up the name Mouthwash and off we go. And I have had these four very brave people that are 4 counting Adam. Adam helps with the show to come along with me. And here we're at 129 shows we've done of this. And I think we try to cover things, from a fair vantage point. And we did have a listener last week, Frederick, and he was giving us the business about, only having we were sort of leaning right. Well, I got 2 Republicans and a Libertarian, and our Democrat has quit. So I told Frederick, I said, hey, come on, Frederick, you could come on the show because everybody's really brave behind that keyboard. But to get out in front of the camera and explain some of the stuff that you're out there dribbling out, sometimes that's a little tougher than it looks. So speaking of somebody who's not afraid, that has more of a left-leaning observation on things, we have Mark Small. And Mark is I see what we're still working on some technical stuff here. So if we're going to listen to Mark Small talk, and I haven't heard it. That's how fun we've had tonight. I didn't even have heard it. I just edited it and got out. Or he could cuss. He could, take off his shirt. I don't know what he's going to do, but we're going to listen to Mark Small. So listen carefully, and we might have some questions on the other side. And then guess what? You're going to be on the hot seat, Steven. And the panels, I can see him in the backstage here, getting ready to grill you. So be ready. I know that you're tough in Martinsville. I grow them tough down there. So let's listen to Mark Small, and then we'll have the panel on the other side.
Hi, this is Mark Small for Small Talk. Media as a word is a plural. Many people say media is biased, but it's not just a nicety or a technicality. Media is plural. If you think about the different media communications that we have, everything from basic telephones, people still use them, cell phones, television, internet, everything, postal service, newspapers, magazines, radio, music, movies, all media communication. Marshall McLuhan wrote Understanding Media in 1964 and tracked just how much we progressed as human beings and all the tens of thousands of years that we have of just recorded communications. Now, that's an important thing. So when people then say, well, media is biased, in what way? You're going to say it's biased against somebody? Who? You're going to say it's that Haywood Broun was asked in the 1930s, well, it's a media bias towards big business. The media are big business. CBS was headed by William Paley for years. He was a CIA operative. It's in his memoirs. The CIA didn't dispute that. Okay. If it's biased against you, how does that harm you? Are you not being given access to media? A right-wing person, as nutty as they want to be these days, if there's not a station or a network or an internet device on which they can broadcast whatever they believe, they'll grab a billionaire that's not being used by Clarence Thomas and go ahead and broadcast. No. The thing is, people aren't buying right-wing messages. And you're seeing the numbers go that way. Last year, when the Red Pill Convention was being held and John Schmitz had as a guest the person who started that whole thing, he said, the guy that started it, so we just need 15%, we can take it. Meaning the country, meaning that that'd be the last election we have. So if you really want to get bias against you, just say things that are unpopular and just wrong in terms of science. I'm Mark Small. Peace, love, freedom, happiness. Take care.
I think that Mark was talking about us a little bit there, everybody.
Yeah.
So I almost got it right this time. I tried to figure out how I could make our guests pop up on the hot seat right out of the gate. Somehow I always pop up out there. I know everybody loves me, and they want to see me out there. Tiffany, don't roll your eyes. I see you up there.
I did not roll my eyes. I like when you do that commercial of you talking to you. It's like your Michael Scott moment.
yeah. At least I could figure out who was who's on there. So, I had to change shirts for that. It was a wardrobe change and everything. It was very difficult for me to figure that out.
Yes,
all the bloopers on that one are excellent. So we have Stephen Crane here, group. We have Stephen Crane. I'm going to go down top to bottom. Tiffany, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Just out campaigning, knocking doors, fundraising. That's my life right now. That's all I do.
All right, Jordan Davis. I know you're working on the Hoosier Summit.
Yes, sir.
How's that going?
It's going pretty good. We actually are getting some stuff into the frying pan, so hopefully we have something good to dish out once we get into August. But I can't complain. It's been a pretty good summer so far.
All right. And Lucy Brenton, no car tonight? What's up with that?
I know. Can you believe it? I'm actually in front of my laptop at a proper desk. The world may end tonight.
It may. I tell you.
World as we know it.
And I feel fine. Yeah, that's right. It's like, hey, call it in. Stephen, aren't you glad you could come in today to the studio? Now, Stephen's our first guest. Hey, Stephen, do you have your shirt handy there?
I do, absolutely. I think it's one of the perks of being the
yeah, there you go. He's if you come in the studio
guest, get a free T-shirt.
We'll get a shirt. I did talk to Jason.
To not be Mr. Obvious, like, why aren't you wearing it?
Well, he's got his shirt on.
I had to plug my own publication, so I was torn. But at the end of the day, I wore what I brought in.
That's not.
Yeah,
that's
not that down
to change.
Do you ever go to the Gillespie Cigar Bar?
You talking to me?
Yeah, Stephen.
No, they do have that cigar bar. In fact, it was they were just building it above my old office. So it's a cigar bar, a whiskey bar. Are you talking about the one right there on downtown?
Yeah, the Nina grew up. I grew up with her, David Lynn Drive here in Indianapolis, and her son was in the. I was a fraternity advisor, and her son was in the fraternity. So they started that cigar bar down there. So if you go to Martinsville, go to Google.
No, I have joked with them. They need to at least run a tube for the whiskey line into my office at the time.
That would be good. I know somebody. We could do that. We could get that done. So, Stephen, tell us a little bit about the Morgan County Correspondent. Is that the name?
Correspondent, absolutely. And so, amid our effort to purchase these local papers back from Gannett, we actually got the green light initially, and that was from the U.S. Chief of Operations corporate guy. I think it was maybe a month later, he was let go amid a corporate restructure. And next guy up said, on second thought, these are not for sale. And so we sort of kept knocking on that door, hoping that the tune might change. And the tune did not change. And so ultimately, because certainly Gannett in particular has shown a pattern of selling off certainly some of their smaller newspapers. And they've done upwards of 50. I know there was another 50 perhaps slated to go. So it could be upwards of 100 at this point. And for reasons unknown, they decided not to sell us those properties, despite the fact that they no longer have any staff. And so, as I alluded to earlier, in terms of my initial hire and the Schurz family, they own those 5 newspapers. At this juncture, 4 of those 5 newspapers no longer have any news staff. And it really is an indictment, in my humble opinion, and really the trickle down of corporate ownership when it comes to particularly local media outlets. When you get outside the big cities, certainly Indy Star, also owned by Gannett, is a very different juncture, a different place. But when you're getting into these communities where you don't have those many different sources of media who may be covering, then a local newspaper really, in many respects and at many times, is sort of the epicenter, the lifeblood of news in that respective community. And so when you're looking at 5 newspapers, 4 now have no news staff. There are, I think the University of Chicago did a study in 2018 that shows the impact when you don't have a local newspaper. And of course, it starts with local government. When you don't have anybody watching local government, spending goes up. You tend to get downgraded on your borrowing abilities. Voter engagement goes down. Your pool of candidates for election goes down. And of course, general disengagement. And so we were hoping to resurrect those historic papers of record going back to the late 1800s. And when it became clear that that was not going to be the reality, then we decided to go out on our own, again, looking and seeing what the role is of a local community newspaper in that community. And there's a reason why I sort of half joke, having been born and raised in Morgan County, I'm sort of an educated country boy in many respects. But I also, all the newspapers that I've ever gone and worked for have always been in those more rural community settings where you really do see the role of the local newspaper, and it's very much intertwined with that community fabric. And so it's one of those roles that is both an honor and a privilege to play when you're serving in that capacity. Particularly editor, I sort of have joked that 50% of that job description is community relations. But when you're talking about a community newspaper, it's absolutely true. You are getting stopped in the grocery store and everywhere in between, answering to the people, and it's abundantly clear that you are serving the people as well, which again is it's a privilege by my estimation.
Okay, so let me be clear here. So are those newspapers still being published and printed out? They just don't have a news staff. So they're
Correct.
basically just pasting and cutting and pasting and filling and sending out whatever they want to send out.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think they may be getting put, last I heard, they were getting put together by someone in Arizona. And so nobody locally is even really seeing those papers until the rest of the public is seeing them. But with that, there are, of course, Indy Star still has staff. Of those 5 down there in South Central Indiana, the Herald Times in Bloomington, when I was initially hired in 2017, I believe their staff was about 37, 36, and I believe their staff at present is 5. And that's in the newsroom. And so that includes the editor, and then there's 4 reporters. And so, yeah, it's
all right. So I know that I have a bunch more questions, but I know the panel does too. So Lucy, since you were driving last week and didn't really get to ask a whole lot of questions, we're going to start with you. What do you have on your mind?
Hey, I appreciate that. Stephen, obviously you're doing the Lord's work. I'd like to know what your plan is, what your plan is to avoid being corrupted, as so many are, in the media.
absolutely. I think a big part of it is being the youngest of 4 boys. And so I've always had authority issues. And so when it comes to somebody no question, you're sitting in the editor's seat, you're trying to be influenced at every turn. Whether you're talking politicians or somebody stopping you in the grocery aisle, and they certainly want to offer their opinion, and in their mind, their opinion is right. And so I enjoy angry people, to be honest with you. I count it a challenge to try to turn those frowns upside down and see if we can't find some common ground. But in general, in terms of the corruption, and again, it goes back to really journalism school, and there are ethics involved, right? And so with that, I take those very seriously. if it's any consolation, for better or worse, my bachelor's degree was in theology. And so whether you're talking morals, whether you're talking ethics, these are things that I truly take to heart. And when it comes to outside influences, I've always sort of gone against the grain just in general. And when it comes to somebody trying to pull this, pull that, even to the point of, let's say there's an elected official, when you're talking about community coverage of that, it's very easy to get chummy, right? Even you're seeing these people at the meetings, you're seeing them all the time. Instead of, hey, Mayor, it's, hey, Bob, how you doing? Part of my, and it may be subtle, it may be my own weird quirk, but I always address anyone that I know I'll be covering with their proper title. How are you, Mayor? And these things, which I think for me serves as a reminder to us both that guess what? We ain't friends.
I love that. I love the ability to, to consciously think about keeping up those barriers so that they don't get the false impression that they can chum around with you.
Right.
Would you, this is kind of a follow-up question, John, would you, make a pledge not to take tainted corporate funds? Like, for example, you would never take anything from Pfizer or Moderna, right? You wouldn't let them advertise
I
with you
think
in
that
any
would
way?
be safe to say, relative to our general, and it's not a hard and fast pledge. However, given the effect that corporate ownership has had at the local level, there is no more local advertisers. In fact, I don't even think local advertisers are able to talk to someone. And so part of our effort is to have all local content in conjunction with darn near all local advertisers as well. We really, in fact, as part of our effort to buy the papers back, we made the rounds to the chambers, we made the rounds at the political parties in the county, town councils, city councils, and we're really trying to garner support and really gauge the interest that the community would have, because it takes a community, and we want this community to not just have the buy-in, but to really feel some of that ownership. In fact, that goes to the model that we have. It's not just sort of me and a silent partner in a bank loan. We have an ownership group of all local folks, 9 people who are all community minded. They're all in it for the right reasons. And that too is instrumental and vital to the mission that we're trying to pull off.
And are you looking for columnists on any topics?
If they're local voices, and I know John used to live in Morgan County from what I gather.
Washington County.
I don't know if that counts or not. Either local voices or local topics, frankly. It's going to be all local all the time, which again is in stark contrast to, well, frankly, what's currently being put out, which is, in fact, we just had the county fair last week. And so I was spending about 9 hours every day at the fair, and really part of our soft debut and letting folks know, the general public, of what we're trying to do. And I think the local paper had 2 stories about the Monroe County Fair, but not a single story about the Morgan County Fair, because of course, again, Bloomington does still have, albeit few, but they still have some reporting staff. And so they're taking stories from everywhere but Morgan County, because again, there's no news staff.
So let me get this before we go to Jordan. Jordan's going to be next. So how long have you been around? I mean, it sounds like to me you're fairly new, and have you even had editions out?
No, our first edition is coming out in late August, actually. And so that, I mean, we're on a leap of faith. We're certainly seeing our landing materialize, I hope. But with that, I mean, frankly, even being at the fair for a week, we came out with over 400 subscribers. And so you sort of speculate there, okay, I think there's a need. I think that people might want this. The need is real. And that was the feedback that we got throughout the fair, is that, guess what? People, particularly when you have a community where nobody else is doing it. So you look at Marion County, of course, you have a number of outlets, whether you're talking TV, magazine, IBJ is doing it, Indy Star, among others, certainly internet-based as well. But when you get into some of those non-metro areas and more rural areas, nobody else is doing it. And yet people want to know what's happening in their community. I think we're combating, really sort of competing with so many different interests these days. You're talking busy schedules for starters, but you're also talking just sort of our digital virtual lives. And so you look at these communities, and that's where you're wanting to really get people re-engaged in their respective communities. And when you're talking Morgan County, so this is going to be a countywide paper, you also want them to be engaged with all the other little communities, even within their county. And so that's really at the heart of the mission, is to really tighten up those threads of the community fabric and sort of take care of the fraying that's happening. So,
Okay.
Everybody that signed up at the fair is taking a similar leap of faith, because we have not come out with our first issue yet.
Okay, so Dorn asks, Lucy's husband asks, is this going to be digital and print?
It is going to be print first, believe it or not. You talk about going against the general tide. Print is not dead, despite the rumors. As Mark Twain said, reports of my death have been grossly exaggerated. We believe in print, and science backs that up. That's what I tell everybody who says, oh, there's something about it. I know I'm old-fashioned. I like holding a paper in my hand. And I tell them that science, in fact, supports their opinion. It's sort of going back to when e-readers first made their debut, and everybody's, oh, the bookstores are going to go away, libraries are going to go away. Not to say that the pendulum will ever completely swing back up, but no question, print is not dead. And so certainly when you're talking in rural communities, you're also talking about connectivity issues when it comes to internet. And we believe in print. We will certainly have digital presence, website, social media, e-edition, all of these good things. But coming straight out of the gate, it's going to be all print all the time in terms of our primary focus. At the outset, it's going to be strong print editions.
All right. Well, that answers that. That's going to be cool. And I think that you would have quite a few folks down there that would want to do that. And Morgan County is fairly rural. So how would that be? Is that a mail thing? Or are you going to put it in store?
Will be. It'll be postal delivery. That just in general, that's the industry trend these days for sure. I know when I first got hired in 2017 back there in Morgan County, we were still using carriers, and about half of them were phenomenal. Been doing it for years and knew their routes, knew their customers, and the other half were not. And so literally our phone was ringing off the hook all day, every day. And literally the day that we switched, of course, everybody's up in arms, oh, you're doing away with carriers. I get it. However, the day we switched to postal delivery, the phone stopped ringing. And so they've been doing it long enough. I know as a federal agency, they have their issues, but they can certainly get the mail out the door and get it in the mailboxes.
All right. Enough of my questions, but those are viewer questions. So, and the Mars Hill Art Center says this question here, hey, I canceled the paper subscription when they switched to digital. Way to go. So there you go. There's proof that our audience members like to have a paper in their hands.
Science is on your side.
Yes, Jordan, it is your turn now.
Thank you, John. Hello, Stephen. Good to meet you and great to have you on the show. I think newspapers, my pleasure. Newspapers are one of the greatest cornerstones, I think, in American history. Whenever we get any type of breaking news back in our heyday, it was always with the newspaper or the radio. That is a trend I think needs to come back. Personally, I'm a big fan of newspapers myself. You think about the art that goes into making that paper. Especially if it's an old school machine and actually taking the time to collect that information and putting the art form together, the style of each artist is different. I love that. My question is tonight for you is we're going to see a little bit of a shortage of, I guess, what we call fresh reporters, those young writers that are out there in the rural counties that may not have programs in school that are really highlighting their literature skills or their writing abilities. So my question is to you, once you guys get up and running, do you guys plan on doing any type of internships with any of the rural county schools to kind of give them an outlet, to give them the same type of access to get some stories written out there and printed? After all, the youth is definitely involved, especially out in the rural county, and why not have them be out there helping you out doing some reporting?
100%. By nature of our masthead and name, correspondent, it's not just a catchy alliteration. We're going to be counting on community correspondence. And a big part of that is also going to be, we have 4 school districts in the county. We have Eminence, Monrovia, Mooresville, Martinsville. And by nature of being a weekly, at least at the start, by this time next year, I would love to say we're going to twice a week, but at the start, we're going to be a weekly. And with that, we'll be having on average about 4 issues per month. And so our intent, in fact, I'm going to be meeting with one of the school districts this week, is to devote 1 page each issue to each school district, and ideally getting some student bylines in there. That is our intent. And it's a matter of, as you mentioned, that student population particularly is shrinking. In fact, I just in my preliminary discussion with the gal I'll be meeting this week, she said, I have 4 students, and I don't want to ask too much of them in terms of, that's a heavy load if I'm asking them to sort of develop 1 page every month with 4 students who are doing their own school publication in addition to yearbook. And so we're going to find a solution, but we absolutely want to incorporate them into the larger model, not just for their own experience, but for the community at large. I mean, it really is sort of bringing back what once was, which is what you knew what your neighbor was doing. And it may not be your literal neighbor. It may be your municipal neighbor, of what's going on in the next town over, the next street, whatever it may be. And that certainly applies to the schools as well. And I think that's been long overdue. It's tough. I've tried before to sort of, but with a limited student population, it is somewhat of a tall order for the teachers who are already feeling stretched in to ask their students to do even more. So we're going to try and figure out something that is sort of amenable for everybody.
So before we get to Tiffany, we got a question from Adam Harvey about letters to the editor. Will you have a section for that? And
Absolutely.
You should.
That's my favorite part of the newspaper. Yes, even if they're angry at me, but that's good too, because that's literally the voice of the community. And when you're talking about a community and generally more rural and everything like that, it takes courage to write a letter to the editor and voice your opinion. Repercussions are real when you sort of stick your head up on the foxhole and have a strong opinion one way or another. In a community, particularly if you're weighing on local issues, it's a little bit easier if you're sort of taking it back at the 30,000 foot and going national. But if you're weighing in on local issues, that takes some courage. That's also a reason, and every editor is different, but that's also a reason I in particular feel somewhat duty bound to weigh in on local issues on behalf of the public so that they don't have to stick their head up. But if I'm sort of, ideally you got your finger on the pulse just by nature of coverage and you're out there covering these meetings so that generally the public doesn't have to. And so you're giving them what's transpiring, but you're also in the know, as it were. And so if I'm hearing enough themes arise from the public, if there's some people who are angry about this or that or taking issue with it, if I hear it from enough places and I see that there is in fact maybe an issue, I will raise a question on the opinion page and sort of feel duty bound to do so, actually, because on behalf of the public. So I'll be the whipping boy for the politicians, but as I say, when it comes to sort of the totem pole of public opinion, the politicians are at the bottom anyway.
All right, that is good information. We have I like that our folks in the chat tonight are really lighting it up here. They're asking great questions, but we got to get to Tiffany. Speaking of courageous, she is on the library board up in Fishers. I had people call that courageous. Some other people maybe call it crazy, but she is definitely courageous. Tiffany, what are you hearing tonight?
Yeah, Stephen, I love that you're bringing back this medium of conversation in your community. But a question and a comment. I'm wondering how you're going to be relevant in the community if you're coming out once a month, because
it'll be once a week. I'm sorry, once a week.
Oh, okay, all right. Woo, that makes
sense. Yes.
Okay, because I was kind of like, everything's going to be old. And so then I guess my question kind of follows what Adam is saying, is that how are you going to compete with like Facebook and Twitter? Because so often I know, like, if we have a school board meeting on a Wednesday, people are like live tweeting the meeting. So how are you going to compete with just things that are happening live, things that are on other social media platforms? what's going to be your take on it, and how will people come to you for information about it? And then I'll have my follow-up.
Sure, absolutely. So at first, I mean, certainly in Fishers, you're going to have people far more connected. Morgan County is a slightly different beast relative to the fact that you absolutely do have your community pages and you have people that are sort of plugged in. One of the strengths clearly of social media is the immediacy. And so if you see a wreck on Main Street, then please believe somebody who's driving by within 30 seconds of that wreck is going to post something at the very least on the community page or something to that effect. And so one of the strengths of a newspaper is not the immediacy. And that is one of the strengths of social media. And so we will probably loosen our grip on that side of traditional coverage. It's sort of scanner chasing, as it were, where you hear something and you're going to run out and find out what happened. I know that even in talking to folks at the fair, that's not the answer they necessarily wanted to hear relative to sort of that traditional, oh, there was a fender bender and little Miss Doris was involved or something, where they do want to know down to that degree of what went down. For us, it's really going to be, so social media, it does have its strength of the immediacy. Similarly, it has some dangers too. When you're talking about folks that are then weighing in, and certainly that is, you talk about the marketplace of ideas. If you're having sort of a live stream of a meeting, then certainly those reactions are there. What we often see down there are somebody heard something and throwing it out there, and then you're getting a bunch of reactions based on something that may or may not be true on its face. And so, of course, on our side of it, verification, trust but verify. And so we are going to the proverbial horse's mouth and talking to those sources and doing what journalists do, which adds, I would say, a number of layers that are vital to a more traditional presentation of news. Social media, it's dangerous waters relative to, certainly you can get your finger on the pulse of opinion, but even then it tends to be a lot of people who have are weighing in regularly. The silent majority is a real thing, and those tend to be the folks who aren't sort of got their pitchforks and torches going. And so we're really, of course, going to be using social media on that immediacy side, but I think the strengths that a traditional approach of newspaper will be sort of outweigh some of those strengths that come on social media. I find myself sort of holding my nose when I go on there and putting on my waders because I know I'm going to be wading in it.
Yeah, but I think that you hit you hit the nail on the head. And I apologize that I guess in this day and age, I have forgotten what journalism is. So,
no, you're fine. And I think a lot of people,
I really think that I've really forgotten that, because you have like the fake news, you have different news sources, but I guess a lot of us in 2023 don't recognize what good journalism is. I remember earlier this year, after George Santos was elected to Congress and things started to come out, and people were like, well, why doesn't anybody know? How did he get elected? And they said it was because of the lack of local journalism, local journalists where he lives, because everybody knew these things, but there was no newsroom and no avenue for them to report it and share it with other people. So I respect tremendously what you're doing. And I guess that's the education piece of it, is the return to journalism. And I think that's wonderful. And then the other thing about letters to the editor, I think that's a really great idea, because people love to see their names.
Yes.
So that's pretty
smart. As long as there's no libel and slander, bring it on. Good, bad, or ugly. Let's go.
Yeah. But I think a return to journalism is a great thing. Congratulations. It's going to be really good.
And I appreciate that. And I truly do think that a re-education is required, because we've gotten, like, this new normal is not good. And so people are sort of relying on social media to stay informed, and I hate even throwing out disinformation, but let's say misinformed, right? And so certainly not fully informed. And so relying on social media in particular to be informed is not going to get you there. And so I think in particular, people recognizing and remembering Wow, okay, this is what journalism is supposed to be. I think will be of value. And again, that's also why we're coming out with the print edition, is to sort of incorporate ourselves into, we're all creatures of habit and routine, but to develop some new old routines for people where a newspaper is part of that weekly routine.
But that makes a lot of sense in this day and age. You can have things that are online that are, they're, things are reworded, AI, some things that you think are real or not real. But it's kind of funny that a return to a print newspaper is the only way to seal the truth.
Well, this is a perfect example, and I felt terrible about it, and I felt super weird. But even when I was at the fair, I talked to an old gentleman who served as a printer for his entire career in the newspaper business even. And so we were sort of talking shop, and he was telling me his experience. And ultimately, so the next day he was struck by a conversation. He woke up the next morning and was inspired to write, like, this is what local news means to a community. And so it's almost like a letter to the editor. He came back to the fair, and he uses a walker even. And so he was determined. He came back to the fair. He dropped off this letter that he had written. And so I took a picture of him holding it. And then I put it online just to say, yes, this is why it matters. But guess what? I said he was a pressman and not a printer. And so I put that on there. Everybody's sharing it, super excited. Oh, look, he was, and it really had nothing to do with the narrative, including his letter. But then he called me that evening and said, hey, just minor detail, not worried about it, but I was actually a printer, not a pressman. And so then I went in and I changed the post. And I felt super weird about changing it, because in print, hey, it is what it is, and you leave it there, and then you run a correction later. And so, but nobody else is the wiser. And so everybody who shared it, then suddenly that got changed unbeknownst to them. Now, mind you, it was more accurate, but yeah, behind the curtain, you can do stuff. And there's a reason why having it in black and white and having to run corrections is a good thing as well. I'm not anti-technology. I certainly think there's a time and place for it. I think it can far too easily dominate. And I think that's also a danger. But in terms of print versus digital, I'm still an old-fashioned sort, as is science, and print wins the day, in my humble opinion.
Okay, so how are you printing this thing? Do you got like a printing press in your basement, or what's going on here?
Keebler elves are going to do it after they put the stripes in the cookies.
After they get done with the cookies, they make the paper.
No, there are far and few between presses these days, right? And so we were going to be printing. We're going to try to print down at the Bedford Press, but of course they closed that in April. And so we are looking at a couple others for our we did a little fair guide, which the paper used to do, which sort of calendar of events, and you're highlighting 4-H'ers and all of these things that really make for a local county fair. And we printed them over in Greenfield, and they did an absolutely fantastic job. I suspect we're talking numbers and all that good stuff, but they're certainly at the top of the list in terms of who we'll ultimately use.
Well, this is really interesting, because we started this show with sort of the same premise of, and it is hard. It sounds like at least you have some experience in journalism, but it's got to be difficult to get going. And one of the things they told me early was content. You just keep putting it out, and then eventually people will do that. Ted Rusk asked, let's talk turkey a minute here. Ted Rusk asks, how much for a full-page ad?
How much for a full-page ad? I will give you the projections, right? Because this entire scenario, again, trying to buy the papers and now suddenly starting our own has been sort of a ready, fire, aim approach. And so with that, our full-page ads, I believe, were $12.50 projected, forecasted in terms of a full-page ad. And then just to start out, full page, half page, quarter page, that quarter page would be $3.50, $3.60.
So if somebody wanted to invest in this fine adventure here, they can obviously get a hold of you. I grabbed your picture off of your Facebook page, but you have probably another way to get for people to get a hold of you or
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you want to go back in the comments after the show, you can go ahead and put that contact info in there, and anything else you'd like to talk about the paper, because people will look at these comments after the show, and we do have quite a few people that'll listen to this as a podcast. I know they can't see our pretty faces, but at least they can listen to the talking. And then Adam Harvey wants to know a little bit more about how and why you left the big world of media. He wants to hear some dirty laundry. We want to hear some dirty laundry is what we want.
So why I left corporate media, or
we want to hear dirty laundry. We want to hear dirty laundry. That was my nice way to say it. I want to see the Wizard of Oz naked behind the curtain.
No,
that's what I want to see. I mean,
well,
not naked,
and
but
speak to how, and I forget his name, you just had mentioned it, how I was elected in local media. They've sort of failed that. And so if anybody remembers that incident at Lake Monroe, does anybody remember that incident? It goes back to the summer of 2020, I believe, and there was allegations of an attempted lynching and things of that sort.
Yes, I remember. That's Sean Purdy, because I'm a bricklayer and I know Sean Purdy. And at the time, I was thinking that's suspect.
Right.
That is very suspect that was what was going on, because I know this guy, and it's like that just doesn't seem right. It just none of it lined up. So go ahead, fill in our viewers.
At the local level, we too shared that sentiment. The gentleman involved, in particular, who made the allegation, came with a particular reputation that preceded him. And so we made that call first thing Monday morning. I believe the allegation was made on Facebook Sunday night. And so first thing Monday morning, my phone's getting blown up by my boss saying, what do we got? What do we got? What do we got? Well, we have a reputation that precedes. And so we're going to approach with caution. And so one of my reporters was, I suspect, one of the first to talk to him. And the conversation was very short, and it was one of those like, oh, what publication are you with again? Oh, that's not big enough for me. And so amid the reputation, we knew that we needed to wait and verify and find out what the full story was before proceeding and putting a microphone in this gentleman's face and allowing him to determine the narrative, given multiple people involved. And needless to say, my bosses at the time did not share our sentiment. And so I passed along the contact information and again said, proceed with caution. Next thing you know, of course, NPR was on his door, New York Times was on his door. And then, of course, I think it was about a week later where DNR, the conservation officers, came out with their actual report, which indeed showed a very, very different narrative than the one initially offered. And so that one did not go well for me as I pushed the pause button despite the top-down dictates that we needed to run. In my humble opinion, being right is better than being fast. And given the many points of pause along the way at the local level, given our previous interactions, I will stick by that approach every day of the week, despite the opinions of the higher ups.
Yeah, that was a very interesting story, and it did turn out to be about 180 degrees on it. So we have some more. This is very interesting. We're already into the hour. Obviously, we started a little late, and we've been having some technical stuff. But I'm like intrigued with this starting an old school newspaper. Jordan, do you have a follow up question here on this deal?
Yeah, I do. Like one of the biggest things that I like what you're really touching on, Stephen, is the authenticity. We don't want everyone to be deputized as pseudo reporters or vigilante reporters, where you'll have a person say something on a response, no evidence whatsoever, and it causes this chain reaction to where even if the editor tries to correct it and try to steer the conversation back to the facts, it seems that people want to reject that reality and substitute in that moment what their emotions are. I do think that writing a paper is really going to make people to take that time, the pause. It's not a cell phone, and actually physically be involved in the process of taking in, okay, what's going on around me? I know what Facebook is doing, what's going on around me, what's going on with the local farmers, I know they're doing business development, all these other things. And maybe if we see folks get more involved in our local paper, they then will maybe be more involved into seeing what their local politicians are doing. And so my thing is, by going back to the basics on how we're getting and disseminating information to our citizens is probably going to put a very large dent in this manipulation machine of influence. And I think this is a very commendable job that you guys are doing. And, this is the age of starter-ups. And I really do think, if you can stay away from corporate interests helping you out and stay local and make sure that you keep God first, I think you guys are going to be very successful. And I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you very much, and amen to that. I sort of liken it to that transition from film cameras to digital, right? What took place when you had a film camera? That intentionality. You took your time, you composed, you made sure you had it. Now we're in the land of digital. And guess what happens? You're going to get a winner in there somewhere, maybe, but it lacks that intentionality that you're putting into it on the front end. And so amid the mess, even the good one may get lost in the shuffle, instead of sort of taking your time. And again, when you're talking print and really compiling, and in fact, that's part of our model. So even our newsroom, it's going to be myself, who's going to be by nature of a weekly editor, reporter, photographer, take your pick. I'll be doing a little bit of everything. And we're also going to have a full-time reporter. And so between the two of us, we will be doing much of the heavy lifting in terms of the traditional reporting, the meeting coverage. But then when you're talking some of the features and things of that sort, then we'll certainly divvy up a little bit and get some of those community correspondents plugged in as well. But there is something to be said for, and when you talk about a rural community, a community newspaper, that tends to be training grounds for people. And that's totally fine. That's understood. And I sort of enjoy that side of it in terms of really letting people, whether it's straight out of school or otherwise, really sort of learn the ropes and sort of sharpen their teeth and really get a handle on what, of course I'm biased, but in my opinion, is a very noble profession of serving a community.
I hope this will be lucrative for you.
Well, sorry.
I said, I hope this will be lucrative for you. Do you have children?
Yes. Well, I say anybody who works in newspaper ain't in it for the dollar signs. That's for darn sure. Generally overworked and underpaid. And anybody who does work for a newspaper is probably in it for the right reasons, which is because they care. And I speak at the local level. But in my experience, anybody that I've worked next to ain't in it for the dollar signs. That's for sure.
Well, I hope it can be lucrative for you because you sound so very passionate about it.
It is, and I can't escape it, unfortunately. I'm so passionate about this. I wish others sort of were, but again, that's sort of why we're there, to remind them you need to care about your community. You need to care about how your tax dollars are being spent. You need to care about how your elected officials, what they're voting on or not voting on. And certainly you need to care about what's going on in the school districts and the kiddos and the sports and the full spectrum. That's, again, sort of why I enjoy community newspapers, because it covers a very, very broad spectrum, from the hard news down to what's being served at the senior center.
Yeah, that is something that is I think it's needed, and I think there's a definite vacuum, a void that needs filled, because this corporate attitude of one size fits all, I believe is not. And I think on our show, we do cover local stuff. I mean, you're local. You're basically central Indiana. You're one of the donut counties. More of a rural donut county. But if you turn on your news, you don't see that. You just don't see what's going on. Now, as you mentioned earlier, I was a resident of Morgan County for 20 years, and I was actually at a zoning meeting for my subdivision when they voted down the 1 cent tax on the stadium. And I just remember all the cheering that they did. And I'm like, wow, everybody else voted for those people are brilliant in Morgan County. You're going to have to up your game to be able to, to impress those folks because they're not. It's a very conservative area. The only one left Democrat I know died, and that's it. So I don't know if there's any more down there. I'm sure there is.
Yeah, absolutely. Becky Waymeyer is still holding it down on the election board, serving as a strong Democrat, and I respect her start to finish.
Yeah, so you could get Kenny Hale or Dan Elliott, Morgan County resident. So and Danny Lundy for Lucy. Lucy's got and he's actually very strong libertarian. And he doesn't wear a boot on his head like that vermin supreme guy. You talk to him. He's got some good ideas, and I think he's actually maybe elected official down there too. I don't know. Lucy is. Danny
He's
Lundy?
running at present. He's running for a council seat in Mooresville, and
I know Danny
Lundy,
well.
he does a fantastic job. I think it's gotten multiple awards for being the strongest libertarian county party in the state. So,
yes, they win all sorts of awards in Morgan County, much to the chagrin of Hamilton County, where his girlfriend lives, and she's she's the county chair there, and he was the county chair in Morgan County.
Yeah, you gotta love that.
I'm looking for my Danny Lundy from Mooresville. I have a little pin, and it says it's a snap to vote for Danny, and it's the gauntlet.
That's it.
They're creative. It's a creative thing. So, anybody have any other questions? Now, Stephen, I didn't tell you about the tinfoil hat. We have the conspiracy theory here, and you are in studio. I got some extra foil you can put on your hat if you want to do that. So, but I think we're running out of time. I mean, this has been very interesting. Anybody got one more question for him? I mean, go ahead, Tiffany.
Yeah. So over the weekend, I saw the movie The Sound of Freedom. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I've not seen it yet, but I'm absolutely familiar. I know it's making waves, good and bad, depending on which side you're looking at it from.
Fantastic. So as it was explained to me, it was made 5 years ago, but nobody wanted to release it. And it's kind of like what you're talking about, like when your newspaper is owned by somebody who's outside of the local community, and they're able to shape what you see and the information that you get. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, like the movie, because it's kind of like, it almost kind of falls into a conspiracy theory, depending on what side you fall. Like, are people really trying to hide this information from other people? Or is this something that's newsworthy?
And I can't speak to the film in particular, not having seen it. I certainly know the background on it. I can speak in general terms that it is. They are seeking to shape the narrative, and they are seeking to present a certain side as whomever it is behind the curtain sees fit. I mean, I was on editor calls with editors across the Midwest, and I was a fly on the wall, not speaking a word, just listening to bias and agenda and all of these things that were being promoted as, hey, guess what? This is what we all believe, right? So this is what we're going to be covering.
Wow.
And I almost got fired a few times as a result of how that played out in my particular newsroom, because some of the things that were being pushed were simply not journalism. It was corporate PR, and I sort of am one who, not worth it. If you want to fire me for it, cool, put me out of my misery. But my integrity is worth more than that. I'm not willing to fulfill the request being made. So when I sort of hear the accusations levied against big media, capital B, capital M, I nod my head in agreement.
So here's the thing. So as we navigate this world of, like journalism and not journalism and information and bias, how can the layperson tell if something is not journalism?
Well, one of the dangers is what the J schools, and it was sort of a loose, it wasn't even that popular. When I was in J school, I started in 2005. There was this idea of, as long as we all sort of fully acknowledge who we are and our biases, then we can sort of write whatever we want, however we want. really at the expense of objectivity. Again, objectivity is the ideal that you will never attain, but that should not prevent you from striving. And so it does require a very intentional approach when you are out doing coverage. But this notion of embracing our subjectivity and for most journalists is a ludicrous notion, and yet it's gaining traction these days from what I gather in J schools. That it couldn't be worse if that were to actually and it is a reality in many ways in terms of seeing what's being produced. But there are those who are still doing good stuff. How does the layperson sort of recognize it? It's tough, frankly, because you're talking language and every word matters. And so word choice, quote choice, sort of how the narrative goes. These are all very subtle things that can be affected and really be shaped by the journalist or the author. So if you're sort of reading it and just seeing facts, ideally you're just getting facts. In fact, what I tell people, even you're going and covering a boring 3-hour government meeting, okay, and you're not going to get all of that into 800 words. So what are you going to do? You want to try to capture the spirit or the essence of what transpired. Certainly you're going to grab what might have the most discussion or what might have the greatest effect on the public. But you're still trying to get the essence of it. And so you're not trying to artificially inflate. If there was a back and forth between a couple of elected officials, you might let that sleep if it really had no bearing. And so it really does come down to good journalists and good editors who are really setting a tone of objectivity and clean coverage, which seems to be farther and fewer between these days.
So I got a question about your past job. Has there been a story where you did a story and they said, you ain't running that?
There was, how shall I? I did get, so we were all approached, again, this is going back to the summer of 2020, and we were all approached. So Gannett took out full page ad, Black Lives Matter ad, sort of to say their names, and it had everybody's names listed. At the face of it, I was uncomfortable with that just by nature of it's a political issue. And so whether you agree, whether you disagree, either way, it's a political football. So for corporate to sort of be sticking their flag in on a political issue as a media company, corporate USA, do whatever you want. As a media company, we have a different set of standards. And so when I saw them do that, okay, not comfortable, but at least it's still a corporate ad. Okay, that's an advertising thing. The thick black line is still in place. And then they came at all the editors and wanted us to write a full page, front page column where we are sort of this self-flagellating. We're not diverse enough, therefore we're going to take X, Y, and Z steps in order to be more diverse. And so I was in Bloomington at the time, which, as we all know, Bloomington is extremely diverse, and frankly, the former editor there was extremely intentional about having a very diverse newsroom. So frankly, in terms of that top-down sort of mandate to write this, I was like, we've been there for a decade, 2 decades, whatever. And so they gave us all, not necessarily form columns, but hey, here's a couple example columns, sort of follow this pattern when you write it. And I did not follow that pattern. And needless to say, that was yet another instance where I was sort of told I may be working for the wrong company.
So they said nicely that you can't run that. So.
Correct. And so somebody else wrote something else and ran that on the front page. Because at that time I was putting out 16, they had me putting out 16 newspapers a week, print editions, and I was managing editor. And so you're not at the 30,000 foot level, you're really ground level, and you're making it happen. And so I didn't have the time. I love writing columns. That's one of my favorites, whether it's something benign or if I'm weighing in on local issues. And I simply didn't have the bandwidth at the time to write any columns. And so I was extremely uncomfortable having one of my first columns be this on the front page, which is extremely rare to put a column on the front page. And so in this instance, I wrote something that, yes, did not go over well with the higher. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was great. I thought it was strong. In fact, I referenced some folks up here who've been doing the Almonds work and really setting that tone. But yes, again, my bosses disagreed.
So, have you ever interviewed someone? This is the last question, by the way. So, all you people up above me don't even get an idea about asking another question because we're really getting long. But this has been a very interesting subject tonight to get somebody that's actually launching something and that they're doing something in an area which hopefully it'll be successful. But did you ever interview someone and then they said, "Please don't run that," or did they, or you did your take on things and they were like sending you a death threat after the fact? Do you have a story that you could tell about that?
I wouldn't necessarily say a death threat. I've certainly had even elected officials at meetings would say something offhandedly, and then they're like, "Oh, please don't print that, right?" Or I've had interviews where somebody will say something. You're cognizant of the fact that more often than not, the people that you're talking to have never really had an interaction with a member of the media before. So you give those folks the benefit of the doubt. The elected officials, it's one of those where I'm sort of, I have a three-prong approach when it comes to the newsroom. And it's sort of, you don't take cheap shots, you pick your battles, and sort of the overarching is you're driven by the public good. I could make many elected officials look like fools because they do. Again, we all sort of speak offhandedly at times and say things we don't necessarily mean or come out the wrong way. And I tend to steer clear just by nature of the long-term gains as opposed to the short-term.
Yeah, if you give them a hard time, they will not talk to you again. And
Right.
As on this show, I mean, Tiffany always points out the fact that I usually make up a word. I don't think I've made up a word this show, which we still have time left. So I'm sure maybe conspiracy theory, I'll do that. So Stephen,
the conversation with yourself counts, so you're good. That's your Michael Scott.
Yeah. So that, hey, I think I said words in that were, some that's are real words. Stephen, we appreciate you coming on tonight. This has been most interesting to have this, and you're going to stick around. You're not an elected politician. You can not only stick around for the conspiracy theory. Now, the good news is you're not on the hot seat anymore, but you could actually come up with a conspiracy theory. So you don't have to have a tinfoil hat to do it, but it does help. Tonight, my tinfoil hat is going to do double duty because my conspiracy is about having protection from things up in the air. So, plus, the radiation, I don't need any more of that. So I'm going to play the segment to that while we get our tinfoil hats on here. Is everybody ready? Jordan, you better not have a silly hat tonight. I'm not feeling like laughing, so don't even try it. So here you go. Let's play this whole thing, and then we'll get to it. Hey, y'all, it's time for the conspiracy theory, so you better get your tinfoil hat out, and let's see what's going on this week. Okay. Hey, wait, what are you doing up there? Lucy, you're not the guest. There we go. That's good. Wait, I want to put it like this. I got to be on this side. There we go. Okay, Jordan, you got to have a different hat on. That's good. And everybody's got their normal hats. Great. You guys are like really on top of it tonight, unlike all the technical difficulties we had before. So let's see who wants to go first tonight on the conspiracy. Let me make sure I get my antennas right here. Okay, I'm good.
I will.
Okay, Tiffany.
Kind of goes back to the last question I had for Stephen. You can't really trust what you see in the media because they're trying to hold information from us, as evidenced by the movie The Sound of Freedom. So just gonna leave that there.
It's conspiracy as well. Is that a comment? He's saying the Sound of Freedom is a conspiracy theory.
I'm saying that the fact that movie was shelved for 5 years because whoever owned it, and I'm not going to throw any names out there, didn't want it shared. It really makes you wonder about what people want us to see and why. So I just think that's like a dog whistle for what's going on in the world. So sometimes it's hard to believe things that are going on, and then sometimes if we open our eyes, we can see so much. That's all.
That's a real conspiracy there. That's unusual for the conspiracy theory these days. real conspiracy because Lucy is conspiracy fact. So Lucy, what do you have tonight? And Jordan has too. So
John, you're on mute.
Yeah, it's actually picking up his ambient mic, I think.
Yeah, so you sort of heard me through this studio.
Yeah, we sort of heard you through a channel darkly.
This is that makes it sound even spookier, doesn't it? Ooh, maybe I'll do my Sammy Terry imitation. George. Yeah, you got to be old to remember
Sammy
that.
Terry's a legend.
Yeah, he was. My mom was the Girl Scout, or his daughter was. She was the Girl Scout leader, troop leader. They lived right down the street from us. So yeah, that was fun having Sammy Terry. And they live by a cemetery too. Huh, that was weird. But Tiffany, I want to say thanks for actually having a conspiracy tonight. That's unusual for the show these days to actually have one. Speaking of conspiracy fact, Lucy, what do you have?
Well, I've got some good advice actually for Stephen this evening, and it has to do with Bill Gates. Stephen, typically I reveal or expose something that Bill Gates has done or is plotting to do. I will say that Kamala Harris has joined the depopulation effort. If any of you have seen, the recent speech. Yeah, where she was excited about how, we're going to have climate
depopulating. Yay.
Because that's going to make other kids,
better.
I know. It was awesome. It was awesome. Bill Gates has been buying up the farmland in the United States. And I can think of nothing more important than corn and soybeans and farmland. And I'm saying this a little bit tongue in cheek, than printed newspaper, right? Because we should be printing it on hemp instead of just cotton pulp or something. So I'm just going to put this out there. I want you to be careful because Bill Gates is gunning for you. He wants to buy you out. So just like I said at the beginning, you've got your integrity plan. You're not taking money from corporate interests. When somebody wants to buy a full page ad, just kind of look behind the curtain and make sure it's not Bill Gates standing there.
I appreciate the advice.
Yeah, hey, to get advice from Lucy, hey, that's you better stick that in your back pocket because it will come true. It will be relevant and true within days, if not weeks. So, Jordan, enlighten us with your conspiracy tonight.
I really don't have one this week. Surprisingly, the world wasn't that crazy this week. So I guess we kind of luck out. So I'll say don't stare into the sun and make sure that you wear a respirator outside in Indianapolis. The fog has been god-awful the past, I don't know, however long. And make sure you look both ways for crossing the street. There's my conspiracy theory.
Okay. Yeah, Canada's on fire. Canada's on fire. News alert. News alert. So, Stephen, do you have a conspiracy?
Well, I mean, I had Canada's on fire, and they all started at the same time, right? Anyway. And I will also piggyback on the Sound of Freedom, the fact that in bolstering the conspiracy that a number of people are reporting that theaters are magically losing power or air conditioning in the theaters that are playing the movie and trying to refund people's money. And of course, the conspiracy is that they don't want to see those gross box office numbers get any higher. So take it for what you will.
Yeah, Harrison Ford's feelings are getting hurt because I guess there's the Indiana Jones thing that's out. This is double the theaters, and he's getting half the audience. So, well, I think this is one of those subjects that is uncomfortable to talk about, but it's something we need to talk about, and I think it's more widespread than people would ever know what's going on. And I think that that's something that hopefully this will spark some more debate about it. We've obviously covered it on our show. And I would say that, next to that type of thing, if you want to go to our kids close by, I think bullying is another thing in our schools that is really, really gotten bad. And so our children are being compromised by outside sources and different things. So I do have a conspiracy theory, and it does include the Magic 8 Ball tonight. And this is, you've heard the UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or as I used to say with my 4 kids in the back of the Suburban, what was it that they just threw at the windshield? So that would be an unidentified flying object. So, you've heard about these things, and I don't know how many people are on Twitter, but there is a flight that somebody put a picture up, and it was of a lady that was sitting next to somebody with a hoodie on, and she claimed that this person was a robot and that they were an alien because their eyes went this way and not that way. That's a pretty good prop I had there, wasn't it? That was good. Just right on the thing. So my question for the Magic 8 Ball is going to be, do aliens and unidentified flying objects exist? So let's see what the 8 Ball says here. Gotta have my glasses on because I'm old. Without doubt. Says without doubt, aliens. And so you heard it here first.
Well, there's your article right there, Stephen. There's your first one.
Absolutely. A1 above the fold. Let's go.
Front page, I can see it now. Mouthwash show exposes UFOs and aliens all in one night.
And we'll quote the 8 Ball.
Yes, the 8 Ball. Wrong. Whoops, I muted myself.
Really?
So, well, group, this has been very much fun with the experiment here. I think that all I know next time is I need different mics and different headphones and different things to do this. But hey, you got a T-shirt out of the deal, Stephen.
Yes, I did. Absolutely.
We want to have you come back on after you launch this experiment, and we want to help you thrive because we need more local folk doing this. We need more people that are willing to take a chance, and you're taking a chance. So make sure you put your information in the chat, and so that we can. So if somebody wants to help,
I live in Fishers. Can I subscribe?
Yeah, you'll just get it a little later than everybody else, but absolutely.
How much is a subscription?
So we have the early bird special, 65 for the year or 40 for 6 months.
I'm doing the math. Okay.
A killer deal, yeah. 52 issues, $1 and $1.15, $1.10 per.
Yay.
Mailed right to your house,
Maybe a crossword puzzle and a Sudoku and a word.
I'm lobbying the group for those because at present, in terms of my dear mother still subscribes to the old historic papers of record in Morgan County, and anytime I go visit and grab the paper, that's always my highlight is the Sudoku and the crossword. So
yeah.
Well, maybe you could put Gary Varvel's cartoon in there because he's the guy that did our logo, and he would fit right in there in Morgan County. As someone said earlier, that Donald Rainwater got second in Morgan County. So those folk, they're tired of somebody. So maybe it's the Democrats, maybe it's Republican. I don't know. Probably I would say the Republican in Morgan County probably came out on top of that. Not the same on all the other counties. But Stephen, we do thank you for coming on, and we appreciate this conversation. And so with this said, this ends our broadcast of the Mouthwash Show. As rocky as it was tonight, I'll be able to edit this thing down into a beautiful 28.5-minute show, and that'll air on channel 40 next Monday at 11. And now that we're at 11, Lucy, you can cuss, and I can put it on there. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think we can cuss, but we can have more. We have more leeway at 11 o'clock because Christians go to bed at 10. That's what I heard anyway. I don't know. That's why I'm still up. So, all right. Hey, group, thanks a lot. We're going to do it here. And Stephen, stick around. Oh, you're sticking around. You're in the studio here. Usually I have to tell the guests to stick around because we have a little follow-up afterwards, which should record because generally it's very funny. All right. Well, we're going to play the ending with Jordan. I'm the producer too. I got to push buttons. So anyway, everybody say peace out, and we'll see you next week where we have Becky Cash. Becky Cash is going to come on, and we're going to talk about throwing up in Brownsburg. You have to tune in to see that one. And then we have Dr. Dan Stock on the 1st, and then I'm working on another special guest for the 8th. So tune in and see what we have to say. Thanks a lot, Stephen. Thanks a lot, panel. See you all next week.